Hi guys, I thought I'd do a little video just to show you how I cut out my segments to make a segmented drum shell. I used to do it this way, which is the usual sort of conventional way of cutting out a segment. You would start with something a bit like that. So they would be cut into straight pieces first, and then you'd cut the ends to the correct angle. But what I was finding is, when you make your segments like that, you end up actually cutting off quite a lot of that wood, or you machine it off on the lathe, or I use a router table to round the shell, or whether you cut the thing into a curve on the bandsaw. At the end of the day, you end up with something like that amount of waste comes off one side of the segment, and that amount of waste comes off the other side of the segment, and you only use the bit in the middle. So you generate quite a lot of waste making a segmented drum or segmented bowl. So I wanted to come up with a different way of cutting out segments so that you didn't waste quite so much wood, and that's what this video is about. I'm going to cut several segments out of this fairly small piece of oak here, which is about 120 millimeters long, and it's about, well, it looks about 2 inches wide or so. I should be able to get about between 3 and 5 segments out of that. I haven't worked out exactly how many I'm going to get. I actually use this thing to cut the segments out. It's just a piece of wood with a series of holes in it, and you need to attach the piece of wood that you're cutting the segments from to this block, and an easy way to do that is to use double-sided tape. But first of all, you need to mark the centre line of that block of wood, and I'm going to do that now, if I can find my pencil. So we draw a line in the midpoint. Okay, now what you need to do is you attach the block of wood with the centre line lining up with the holes that you're going to use as pivot points to cut out the segments. Now I'm going to use this line of holes here, which are at 11mm centres, and they're going to produce segments which are about 10mm thick, allowing for the saw cut of the curve. So I've got a bit of double-sided tape on there, which I am going to use to attach this. So you align that line with the centre line of the holes. There we go. Now that's actually a pretty strong bond. It's perfectly adequate just using a bit of double-sided tape for this exercise. So that's the first thing. Second thing, you're going to need a circle cutting jig for the bandsaw to cut out these things. Now this one is very simple. It's just a piece of MDF with a piece of wood fixed to the bottom and a slot cut in it. Now you need to align the front of the blade with the hole that you're going to use on here as a pivot point. And which, in this case, I'm going to use that hole there, which is 7 inches away from the blade. So you make sure the jig is aligned so that the hole lines up with the front of the blade, and then you can clamp the thing on to the edge of the bandsaw table using that little block of wood that's screwed to the bottom of the jig. Now to cut out the segments, the first hole, I'm going to make a segment a 14-inch diameter ring, so the radius is 7 inches. So the first hole needs to be at least 7 inches away from this edge. So I'm going to work out which hole is going to be the first one. Well, that one there is just less than 7 inches, so that's going to be the first hole I'm going to have to use to make the first cut. To make the second cut, I'll move the drill bit to the next hole, and that'll produce the first segment. Then I move it to the next hole, I'll make another segment, move it to the next hole, make another segment, until I run out of wood. So what we're going to do, I've forgotten which hole I'm going to start with, it's that one there. So that's just over 7 inches from that edge of the block. So we then put the drill bit into the hole on here, and that gives you a pivot point to cut these things out. Okay, now it's important to actually keep the offcut from this side of the board, because you're going to use that later when we're trimming the segments to length and to the right angle. But I'll show you how this technique works pretty quickly to generate several segments from quite a small piece of wood. To keep that piece. Move the drill to the next hole. First segment. Okay, I've run out of wood. I have one little piece left, which you can easily remove. Okay, so from that block of oak, I've managed to get 2 offcuts, but I've got 4 segments there. If you cut your segments out like this, you're going to end up with an offcut from every segment, rather than, sorry, 2 offcuts from every segment as opposed to 2 offcuts from 4 segments. So you really save on the amount of waste you generate by cutting them out this way. And obviously if I had started with a board that was 6 inches wide, I'd be able to get about 10 segments out of that, and I would still only have 2 pieces of waste. So yeah, a little piece of wood 6 inches wide by 4.5 inches long, that would be enough wood to make 1 ring. Okay, this is my sled that I made for cutting segments to the correct angle. It's fairly simple. It's just a piece of laminate faced chipboard. It's got a runner screwed to the bottom which fits through this slot on the bandsaw table. Now it needs to be a nice snug fit. If it wobbles about sideways, it's not going to be accurate enough. Now this piece of wood here is cut, or screwed down to the top of there, and it's at the angle, it's at the correct angle for trimming the segments to 18 degrees at the end, which is the angle you need for a ring with 10 segments. So it's 180 divided by the number of segments, in this case 10, that gives you an angle of 18 degrees. So it's the angle between this block of wood and the blade is actually 90 degrees minus 18, which is 72. I use one of these things, so drafting set square, to set the angle. So that's the angle between this block of wood and the blade as you slide this thing in, because these things can be set very accurately. So here's our segments that we made earlier. What we're going to do is, using this offcut, we're going to place that against this block of wood here. Then we're going to get the segment and place it there against the offcut. That's going to hold the segment against this piece of wood, and it's going to give you a nice straight edge to work from, so that you can cut the ends to the correct angle. Now these pieces need to be 110 millimeters long once we trim both ends. The best way to do it, I found, is to trim one end of each piece first and then flip them over, and then you can use a depth stop to trim them all at the other end, and that ensures you get them all the same length. Okay, so what I've done is I've attached another couple of little pieces of double-sided tape onto the bottom of this thing, and I'm just going to attach this onto here to hold it in place. I've also marked on there the length that these things need to be cut to, so I get it in the right place. It's going to be about there. So that's now securely fixed. And what we do is you take each segment, you align them so that the centre line of the segment aligns with the centre line of the offcut, because we've already marked that line. Then you can hold it like that and trim the end. Now that's going to get it to the right angle. It's also going to, by the time we trim both ends, it should be the correct length. The best way to do this is to trim one end of each piece first and then flip them over, and when we trim the other end we can tape another block of wood on here which will act as a depth stop to make sure they're all the same length. So I'll trim the first end of these 4 pieces and then I'll show you how to trim the other end. Okay, so we've now trimmed one end of each of these pieces. The other end is still at the same angle it was at before. So what we need to do now is flip them over and trim this end. And I know, because I've made these before, that the length from corner to corner needs to be 110 millimeters once both ends are trimmed. So we mark the first one to length and draw a line so we know where to cut it, and then we can use a depth saw, attach a little block of wood here, which will allow you to slide this up till it hits the block of wood, and then you trim that end, and that will make sure they're all the same length. Okay, what I've done now is I've used double-sided tape again to tape this block down to here, and what that's going to do is act as a depth stop to make each one of these 110 millimeters. So as you can see now, all the segments are now the same length and they're trimmed to the correct angle at the ends. Just need a little bit of sanding to take off these little splinters that always happen at the edge. And they'll be, once I've got 10 of these, I'll have enough to make one ring. So, I mean, I got 4 segments out of quite a small piece of wood there. If I had a wider board, I could have got all 10 out of one piece. So it's pretty quick and it saves on waste.